panel. We are featuring tonight some truly phenomenal African-American women who have been breaking barriers for a long time and continue to break barriers and shape the future from the C-suite and beyond. Tonight is not just a panel, it's going to be a moment of reflection, empowerment, and connection as well. Each of our speakers today brings a unique story of leadership, resilience, and Black excellence. Um, so we'll be diving into what it means to lead as a Black woman in spaces where we are often underrepresented. And we're going to talk about how these women are not just surviving, but also thriving and owning their power and paving the way for others. So for those of you in the audience, get ready for an evening of truth telling with a little bit of laughter, maybe a few aha moments, and definitely a lot of inspiration. So whether you are a rising professional, maybe a recent graduate, just getting started, or if you are a seasoned leader or somewhere in between, you're going to leave here with insight, courage, and probably a sense of community. So before we get started with our panel, just want to give a couple of housekeeping rules. So please make sure to stay on mute with your cameras off if you are not asking a question. We want to make sure that you are here and you get the opportunity to learn and grow and feel like your commitment to being here with us tonight was worth it. So please feel free to drop questions in the chat as we go throughout tonight's conversation. So without further ado, I'd like us to get to know our panelists a little bit. May I ask you all to start by introducing yourselves, however you'd like to do it, but at least your name, your current title, or maybe a previous title, former or current employer. And then as a fun icebreaker question, I want you to think of when you're getting ready to do a big presentation or you have a big meeting coming up. What is a song that gets you in the mood that says, "Yep, this is going to work. I'm going to do it," and it kind of pumps your head up? Maybe let's start with Dr. Wilson.
Good evening to everyone, and thank you, Deirdre. My name is Dr. Charlene Wilson. I currently serve Rochester Regional Health here in Rochester, New York, as the Executive Vice President and Chief People Officer. So one of the songs that gets me hyped is by Mark Gutierrez, and it's I Trust in God. The reason why that is so important to me is I have learned through my entire 25 plus years in the healthcare business that trusting God serves as a platform for me on many levels. And so anytime I'm getting ready to do a presentation, facing something that is very difficult, making sure that I've got the strength and the resilience to go through things that seem to be adverse, I go to I Trust in God. Thank you.
And thank you. And how about we go to Essie Calhoun McDavid next? Oh, you're on mute.
I knew you were coming to me next. Thank you, Deirdre. Good evening, everyone. I am Essie Calhoun McDavid, and I'm so excited to be here today with all of this current leadership. I am the maybe old guard here. I am retired. I have been retired for 14 years. I retired as Chief Diversity Officer and Vice President at Eastman Kodak Company. And the joke in the community, though, is that I really didn't retire. I just stopped getting paid. So, but I haven't been in the workplace as an employee for 14 years. So I'm excited to be here to share whatever I might share that might be helpful to anyone sitting out there. And I was trying to remember, I thought the question was going to be, did I have a playlist? Because I don't have a playlist, but I do like Motown sounds. And I love gospel music. And so I have various songs that I turn to at different times. But I have to admit, I don't know that it's a song as much as it is for me a prayer. And I tend to just pray and ask God to use me and let me be a blessing to others.
That's wonderful. Okay. And just a reminder to our audience to make sure that you're on mute and your cameras are off. Okay. All right. And let's go to Dr. Henry.
All right. Good evening, everyone. It is a pleasure to be in community with you all. Thank you for inviting my voice into this very important conversation. I'm excited to share and even more excited to learn. So, yep, Myra Henry, Dr. Myra Henry, President and CEO of YWCA of Rochester and Monroe County. Song I'm a cheat. I know you said a song, but as Essie mentioned and Charlene, it really does matter the situation and the feeling and the space that you're walking into. So three real quick ones. Close by Marvin Sapp, and I know he's not invited to the cookout right now, but I do like that song because it reminds me that no matter how difficult things are becoming or that how difficult things are, that I'm close to my victory. I'm close to what God is calling me towards. I Am Every Woman, the Shaka Khan version. I love Whitney Houston, but the Shaka Khan version, that gets me going every single time. And then lastly, Love Sponge by Buju Banton. That's my husband and I. That's our wedding song. And we're 30 years in now. So that always reminds me that I'm loved.
I like that. Okay, you had a nice mix there, and I am not mad at you for those three songs. I'm sure that there are people in the audience that are jotting down the songs, and they're gonna make a Go Girl playlist of their selves. So, and last but certainly not least, Dr. Breland.
Well, good evening, everyone, and thank you for having me. I believe in leading boldly, living purposefully, and pursuing justice. And I am the CEO and founder of TISO Consulting Group. I would say that I am like a serial entrepreneur. So I've founded a number of organizations in the past. I also have led at the state level in state government as high as a deputy assistant commissioner. So that was a few years back. However, that experience still is a very powerful experience for me. A song that I like, so I'm a gospel singer. There are a whole bunch of songs that I love, but this one actually kind of pumps me up. It's one that kind of goes back a little bit called "The Best Is Yet to Come" by Donald Lawrence. And it's just a great song, a great message, and it has a great beat.
I'm familiar with many of those songs, and if I could just throw in one for myself, in the last couple years, it's been Corinne Hawthorne, Won't He Do It? I started a new job in 2023, and I played that song probably about 3 times on my way to work, and I was like, it's going to be great. He's going to do it. It's going to be good, and it was a great day, and so far things are going well there. So I'm glad. Thank you all for sharing that with me. So let's get into a couple of questions. So I'm going to ask a couple of questions. I'll start with just one, and whoever feels called to answer, go ahead and start. And then if there's multiple people that want to answer, that's absolutely fine. Okay. Can you share a pivotal moment in your career when you realized you had the power to influence real change, not just for yourself, but for others coming behind you?
I'm happy to answer that question. While I was serving at the Department of Education, the commissioner actually came to me and said that he wanted to host a statewide conference. And essentially, I was able to choose what that conference was going to focus on. And the conference actually, I decided that the conference really should focus on educational equity because we had a lot of inequities in our school system. And it was the first time that we brought educators and educational leaders together from across the state of New Jersey, where I am. And we had over 1,000 educators present. And it was really the first time they had permission to talk about this huge issue of educational equity. And I think that by giving them permission, the work started. Now, there's a whole lot of work that still needs to be done in that space. However, the conversation was opened up. People felt like, okay, now I can talk about the elephant in the room. And that was really important.
Anyone else can think of a moment?
Yeah, I'll go next. My pivotal moment, it was my first vice president's role. I had moved to a new state, the state of Arizona. Prior to that, I was working for-profit healthcare industries and never got a chance to really delve into compensation, couldn't make my own compensation structures up. When I got to Arizona, it was a nonprofit. And when my CEO said, okay, you need to go through the compensation structure, create a new one. If there's any inequities, let me know. And I realized as I went through that exercise that the power to be able to determine pay, to be able to determine whether or not there were inequities in pay, whether they were women, whether they were people of color, was a powerful position to be in. And thusly, I know then that I received a lot of backlash for having the abilities as well as the power, as you just said, to make these decisions. That was a pivotal moment in my career to understand that even with power comes responsibility. And so I must, as an African American woman, being in a seat where there's no others that look like me, have a responsibility to each and every person to make sure that the decisions they're made fair and they're made equitable.
And if I can,
now I did, sorry, real quick, I did hear you just kind of breeze past, oh, my first vice president role. So you've done this multiple times. I just wanted to make sure we all heard that. Thank you for sharing that. And I think one of the things that I recognize with that is that whoever sat in that seat before might have known that that kind of inequity was happening, but you had the opportunity to actually change it because you've probably been where they were. You've been at a point where you were doing the work and we're getting paid, what is it, 68 cents on the dollar, 75 cents on the dollar. So being able to change that for people so it can really trickle down the way it's supposed to, that's amazing. So thank you for sharing that. And I'm sorry, I almost cut somebody off. Somebody else was going to say something. Sorry.
So I just wanted to jump in and add voice to those of us who are in leadership positions, but perhaps may not have the title, right? Because we lead from the seats that we sit in. And with that type of leadership comes a great deal of influence. And I can say from an experience as former role as a college administrator at one of the local universities here, I can remember when the dean I was working with at the time would call for meetings with this group or that group, you name it. But it was every group of students that didn't look like my children. And we had a very trusting relationship, had a very bi-directional relationship. So I was able to whisper in his ear and say, well, what about the students of color? What about, when are you meeting with the Black Student Union? And that was the first year. And he, never thought about it. They never asked. So I said, okay. The next year, it wasn't me whispering in his ear. It was me putting the students on his calendar and saying, you got these students this year. And making sure that I reached out to those student groups, because to your point earlier, there may have been someone in the seat before me who also didn't think about all students, but particularly the students that looked like my children.
So as we talked, I've had so many different thoughts and I've gone so many different places. And so I'm thinking about women who are, I'm not sure who all you invited to this, but who might be at a different point in their career and haven't gotten to the point where they have power. And so I think it's one of the things that has marked my careers has been, not waiting. And I think Myra really just sort of triggered this in me for when you actually have permission, but making sure that you take the calculated risk to do something that maybe wasn't your responsibility or your assignment. So I'm going to talk a little bit about probably what most people don't know about me is that before I came to Kodak, I was in education. I was in education in Prince George's County, Maryland. And so I'm not going to go to some things that I did there, but when I came to Kodak in sales and marketing, and one of the things that I did that made a difference, not as much from the standpoint of for people of color, but for my district, we were introducing a new product and a new copier. I was a copier salesman for them. And I decided that I wanted to have a seminar in downtown Baltimore for my customers. And I was a new sales rep, so what made me think I could do this? But I went to my district manager, and I also have this bad habit of going the next level up. So for anybody out there who I look for who can make the decision and who is probably going to make the decision that I want to have made, and said that I wanted to do this. And then he said to me, I could do this if I did it for the entire district. And so I had to organize this seminar in downtown Baltimore for the entire sales team. And, again, going back to just looking to God and saying, I'm in this new field, in this new area. I hope I have skills that are going to transfer. But I was able to successfully do that. And then once I came into corporate, here in Rochester, here I was again. I'd left my line of business and had come into this other whole world, and they're like, who is she, and why, how did she get this job, and what is she doing here? And it gave me the opportunity to actually go around the country and work with nonprofit organizations in communities of underserved people, and to take Kodak's money and go there and do that. And that was the pivotal moment for me that let me know that I could actually use my influence and use the company's resources to make a difference in the lives of others.
I feel like the common theme of everything that everyone kind of said was lift as you climb, right?
Yes.
So when you get to a point, see how you can bring other people along. So the college is making a decision. Your students go to that school too. They need to be included. They need to be in those conversations. So I think that was excellent. Thank you for that. I've got another question. The next one, what are some subtle or not so subtle challenges that you have faced navigating corporate spaces as a Black woman, and how did you overcome them? Now, I know that's a loaded question because it could be everything from your hair or what you bring to the potluck, but whatever you can think of that you would like to share. Whoever's risky or brave enough to answer.
Right, so one of the first things that came to mind for me, it's back to when I had come into Rochester in this role where I was, at that time, I think they called it Director of Public Affairs Planning, but it was to help the company to build relationships in underrepresented communities around the country. And I really only stayed in that role about a year and a half. And I was tapped to become the Director of Community Relations for Kodak. But what my challenge was that I was working for someone who felt, I'm going to say, didn't support me, whether it's because they felt threatened or didn't feel like I belonged in the job or whatever, but really didn't respect the work that I was doing because, the other departments under him, I guess, were things that he valued more. And also, I was the only Black person in the whole division. And I had already, I guess, probably done something that he didn't think was so great. When that position was first created, it was a position created and it had no budget. So the first thing I did was came in and decided that that would not work for me. I didn't need to go to marketing to get money. So I created a plan, took them my budget design, and was able to get money. But anyway, one of the things that I decided was that if this individual did not want me in this job, then he would have to find a way to fire me or get rid of me. But I think it's really important because, and even now, especially in this climate, it is important for young women who are building their career and climbing to make a decision not ever to be run out of your role. Don't be run out of your role. And so I decided that he wouldn't be able to take me out. And so you have to look for allies, and you find allies that look like you find allies that don't look like you, and you find higher ups, and you build those relationships, and you take advantage of opportunities. You take advantage of tasks. For example, once I was in this role, one of the CEOs said to me, I want you to come and give me a report on what it is that you've been doing the last year or so around the country. But I realized that it wasn't just what I was doing in these communities around the country. There were other individuals working in the marketing area. There were individuals working in the human resources area. There were others who were doing similar work. So what I said to him is, I think it would be better if I brought you a fuller picture. And I created a council. Nobody asked me, nobody told me. I didn't ask permission. As a matter of fact, this boss who didn't like me asked me later, well, who told you to create this council? But I created a council, and we all came together, and we all put together this presentation that showed what our goals were, what our strategies were, what we were achieving, and how this would benefit the company. And so taking on new opportunities, taking on new tasks, looking for opportunities, creating things on your own, but being bold about what you do, being confident about what you do, making sure that you've got support, that you've got some allies, and that you're taking risks. Look for mentors and supporters in other areas and above you. So I think, and the other thing is understanding the power of your position. Sometimes we don't. And it's not that we're lacking in any way. It's there are people around us who don't want us to understand or to utilize the power in our position. So I think it's really important to understand the power of your position and not to be afraid to utilize that power. But, so those are some of the things that I would share.
So I'll jump in and just add to that. Pull on that thread just a little bit, and also talk about standing in the power of our positions. Challenge when you have a direct report that looks at you, a white woman that says, I don't know how to talk to you because I've never had to report to a Black woman before. And my response to that was, well, you need to figure it out. And walked away, right? I'm your boss. I'm human, just like you're human. I'm a woman, just like you're a woman. Not quite sure why it's so complicated. We speak the same language and are about the same age. So I'm not understanding the challenge in that dynamic, nor is it my responsibility to help you figure it out. So being able to stand in the power of the position that you hold, not in an arrogant way, but in a way that lets people know that you won't be bullied by their perceived privilege.
And can I just add, this really triggers for me, and I love the contrast. See, when I was in the workplace and getting in these roles, no one would say that to you. That's what they were thinking. And they would spend probably as much time as they could seeing if they could sabotage you. But this is the dialogue that you guys get to have, that my generation didn't get to have. No one would say that to you, but you would know that that's what they're thinking. So thank you, Maria, for sharing that. Yes.
Thank you, Myra. Thank you. I'm sorry.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Essie, I just want to piggyback on that a little bit. I think that those microaggressions that you were mentioning in your day still exist today. Let's not make no mistake about it. And so what we mean about those microaggressions, for me, what I have experienced is those microaggressions tend to look like isolation. And what do I
Mhm.
mean by that? Not being invited to the table when decisions are being made when you should have, and then you got to go back and clean up the mess that was made
Yes.
because you weren't at the table and you should have been. Or
Yes.
when you walk into a conference room with a lot of different dignitaries and officials there, and you're the only African American, let alone African American woman, your colleagues walk in with you, they get approached by a hello, how are you doing? And nobody says anything to you.
Yes.
You get silence. And so, just for the young ladies, older ladies, wherever you are in your career, just understand that those microaggressions are real and you've got to deal with them. And
Mhm.
sometimes in my journey, I didn't have the ability to go to someone else in the organization because there was nobody
That's
else
true.
in the organization that I could go to in confidence. So I sought mentorship outside of the organization. But it's extremely important that the women of today understand one, that those microaggressions exist. And I
Yes.
believe that they will continue to get worse than better.
Mhm.
And so you must be confident and who you are and what you've done and the purpose in which God has set you in that moment, in that time. Embrace it. Find someone maybe outside of work or inside, depending upon your
Mhm.
organization, that you can confide in, that can give you wisdom and knowledge about these issues. But most of all, remain humble. No
Yes.
matter what comes in your face, and it comes in your face,
Yes.
humility will always win the battle if you allow it.
And
And
I,
I would just add, maintain your own integrity. Stay true to who you are. You, it's hard sometimes, but you have to maintain your own integrity.
yeah, I also want to add that I came up during a time where I was told I couldn't just be good at what I do. I couldn't be as good as the next person. I had to be better, and I had to do more. And that was kind of just how I've led. And I've been in spaces where I am the only face, and oftentimes I'm the one standing in front of them. And I make a point to note to share that I notice that I am the only face in this room. I've done that many times, and I've had people be very bold. And there was one place as in the role that I have now as an entrepreneur, and I was actually conducting a training, and it was a training in the DEI space, and the room was probably a good 100 or so people, the majority of whom were white. And there was a woman that was bold enough to say, well, when I look at you, I don't see a Black woman. I could see a well-dressed, woman. And I'm like, well, if you can see my identity as a woman, then you can see my identity as a Black woman. You better believe when I walk into a room, everyone knows that I'm Black because there's no part of me that I can hide. So, and in doing that, I then have to just break it down. She went even further and said, some people might not want me to say this, but when I was growing up, I had a Black maid, and she was my best friend. And then when my father divorced my mother, and then we were poor, and I had to ride the bus with the Black kids. And this was just a year and a half ago. So this was not even a long time ago. This was very, very recent. And I said, listen, you better believe that if that Black maid had the educational opportunities that I was extended, she would not have been your maid. And she was not your best friend. He was trying to keep a job. And so
Mhm.
you just have to break it down. And I did it respectfully, and I did it in a way that she also knew, don't come for me, because there a lot of times we're in spaces where um we are disrespected simply because we are Black and because we are Black women. It's almost like, and I remember hearing growing up, you got two strikes against you. You're Black and you're a woman. And I hated that. I hated hearing that. but I understood where they were coming from. They were talking about that anti-Black hate that's out there, and even the anti-women hate that's out there. And that was the world that I was growing up in. And so I like what Charlene Wilson said about the confidence that we have to stand in, because we do. We have to stand in that confidence, and we have to understand the power that we have and the shoulders that we stand on.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you. Y'all are telling these stories, and I'm clutching my invisible pearls over here with some of the things that people have felt that it's okay to say to you. So, again, thank you all for sharing your stories. Several of you mentioned mentorship while you were giving your last answer. So I just wanted to circle back on that to ask, how important is mentorship? And how are you paying it forward now that you have, kind of gone up that corporate ladder, you're in positions of power. And when someone, and going further, if someone is looking for a mentor, how do they start? What should they be looking for? I've always heard that you need like a mentor, a champion, and a sponsor all at the same time. They could be one person, but they could be multiple people. So I'd like to get your take on the idea of having a mentor, how to go about finding one, and what should be the what you should get from your mentor and what you should be able to give to your mentor too, because sometimes it could be a two-way street. So you could talk a little bit about that.
I'll start. In my experience, I actually did not have a mentor until more recent years. But I've been mentoring since I was 23 years old. That was when I had my first mentee. And it was important for me to mentor. And for the most part, I mentor young Black women, but I also have some white women that I've mentored and some men, white and Black, that I've mentored over the years. And mentorship is really important because it's an opportunity for me to not just support someone, but to coach them and to provide them with resources and access. And I'll say that the reason why it was important to me to mentor is because I wanted to be for someone what others weren't for me. And
Mm-hmm.
you can look for mentors, but they're not always to be found. And so it's important for me. I feel like part of my mission and purpose in life is to make a difference in the lives of others. And so I've extended myself over and over again to young people and some not so young who are looking for opportunities and who are looking for either advice or doors to be open. And it's an honor and a privilege for me to be able to do that. And when I can, I do. And I do it often. And I'm grateful for the opportunity to be able to do that for others.
Wonderful. Anyone else have a
Yeah.
comment about mentorship?
Well, go ahead. Go ahead, Mara.
I'll add, because you asked about a couple of things, right? Mentorship, sponsorship, coaching, and I'll just add perspectives around mentorship and sponsorship. Mentorship, I think, is very important, and really simply, you to find one you ask, right? You find someone you admire who either it has walked the path that you're walking, that has arrived at the place that you want to be, and just by asking, of course, they may say no, but but you can always, most people, I've learned in my experience, most people love to talk about themselves and love to talk about their journeys. So I always have 3 good questions at the ready to ask folks that would that they can shed a little bit of light on who they are and what their leadership journey is. And that could be a 15-minute coffee. It doesn't even need to be a long, drawn out thing, although mentorship can be. More importantly, I wanted to highlight sponsorship and the importance of sponsorship. The role I have right now at the YWCA is because a sponsor saw value in me at a time when I perhaps didn't see value, at least this type of value, in myself. And I've never said this out loud. I've never said this publicly. I recognize it is live. I recognize there are a whole lot of people on this call that I know, including my Madam Basilisk from Zeta Phi Beta. But it's being recorded. But I'm going to say this: the job that I have, I applied for it and never read the job description. Now, how does that happen?
Mm-hmm.
Well, a sponsor sent me the information, said, I think you would be great for this job. And when the email came through, I said, oh, Lord, bless his heart. He just really likes me. I can't do this work. And so I let it pass. A week or so went by, and the sponsor circled back around and said, the organization is waiting for your materials. And because I have such great respect for this person and the role they played in my life, I had deleted the email, so I couldn't find the job description, was afraid to ask for him to send it again. And I submitted my materials and said, okay, Lord, well, if this person believes in me, I'm going to submit my materials for this job, apply for this job, because this person I know wouldn't steer me wrong, even though I'm not sure that I have the qualities to do this role. And quite literally, the rest is history. I showed up as my authentic self. I laid it all out. I gave it to God, and I got a job. But it took a sponsor, someone to see in me what I couldn't see in myself, and me leaning into that to say I can do it. And that is what I feed into others. Oftentimes when folks, and we as Black women, right, are real good at talking ourselves out of opportunity, real good at that in our own heads. These aren't even conversations we have out loud. So when I see that happening for folks in my orbit, I will talk them back and be like, you can do it. You can do it, and just keep that same talk track. You can do it. We're going to do this together.
Yeah. I don't know, Myra, every time you talk, you trigger me, but yeah, I too did not early in either of my careers, didn't feel that I had a mentor anyway, certainly when I first came to Kodak. But the whole sponsorship part, sometimes we forget about that part. That is really, really important. In fact, I would not have come into corporate headquarters had it not been for a sponsor, someone who had come to our district. By this time, I was a sales manager. I had been to Rochester, gone back, and again was doing an event on Capitol Hill to announce a grant. No, I'm sorry, that's not true. I'm sorry, to work with, to get business from the city of, from DC city government for our office, for my team. But one of the vice presidents had come down for us to make this big announcement and be a part of what we were doing. And when this position opened up, he said, what about that young lady down in DC? She was so impressive. And so one of the points I want to make around that is you never know who's watching. You never know who's looking, because I did not know him. He had simply come in for that event. And I was told later that he's the person who surfaced my name. And that allowed me, once I was in corporate, to understand the importance of keeping those connections and having sponsors and figuring out who your sponsor might be. Because your sponsor is someone who will be in a room that you won't be in. And that's the person who will promote you and talk about you because they know of your work. The other thing that you mentioned was a champion. So I'm going to tell a little story. I know you guys, I really did do the work, I guess, to get somebody's attention, but I kept getting all these blessings. I'd come into corporate and I'd been named, I was in my second role, I'd been named Director of Community Relations. And this is when I was working for the supervisor or the manager who really wasn't supporting me at all. And Kodak got its first CEO that didn't grow up in the company. He came from Motorola. And we were having a community event to showcase him and introduce him to the community. I barely made it into the room. I almost didn't go. And I was at the back. And when I say the back, the very back of the room. And he said, wow, one of the reasons I'm really excited about coming to Kodak is the people who are here. When I was getting ready to leave Motorola, one of my one of my staffers came into my office and said, "Oh my God, you're so lucky to be going to Kodak. You're going to be working with Essie Calhoun, one of the best community relations directors in the country." And I'm sure the whole room, especially my division and this boss who didn't support me or the work I was doing, I was shocked. I was shocked. And the point I want to make around this also is that it is important for us to lift each other up. This was a Black female. We were together on the conference board, Community Relations Council. And she went in, and that's all she said to him. And when my name came out of his mouth, I nearly fainted myself because I'd never met the man. But I made it a point to get on his calendar and to go up and let him see who he was talking about and to tell him what I was doing and to build a relationship there. And so my point is that it's important to have sponsors. It's important to have a champion if you can have a champion. But very importantly, it is important for us as Black women to lift each other up and to support each other.
Oh, so true, Essie. Thank you for that. Really can't think of a time in my career where I necessarily had a sponsor, at least that I knew of, but mentorship has been very near and dear to me. So I'm a product of HBCU school for those Hamptonians that are out there, Hampton University. And as a freshman, all through our 4 years, we always had a mentor that was part of the faculty. And so I had the privilege at that time, at a young age, to understand the importance of mentorship and what it means as it shapes you as a professional. And then later on in life, I had the opportunity to have a mentor who is actually, or who was actually the head of the EEOC for our entire country, Carrie Dominguez. Those of you who are in that work would remember her. She was appointed by son Bush back in the Bush administration. And one of the things that she taught me that I have been able to pay forward is the understanding of your leadership in season. And what she showed me was that I was worried about kind of my career. I was following a military husband. We were moving a lot. I was changing jobs a lot. And I was beginning to think, I have second thoughts about my ability to continue to progress in my career. And she taught me through actually biblical terms that there's actually three types of leaders. There's those leaders who have the ability to break up fallow ground. I mean, that ground is hard, it hasn't been watered, but they have the tenacity and the strength to break up that fallow ground and plant the seed. That doesn't necessarily mean that you have the competencies necessarily to water it and to nurture it. You might only be there just to break up the ground because you have the courage to do it. And then somebody else may come along and plant that seed and make sure that it's nourished and it grows. And then there's those leaders who may come in who is able to do the harvest of what you worked so hard on. Then the plant was seeded. And then after that, it was nourished and now harvest. And so what I do in my mentorships, and I have them all over, at work, at church, in the community, is try to connect women, especially, with the notion of who are you as a leader? What do you purpose to be and do as a leader? Let's start with that fundamental foundational understanding, because from that, then you can understand what it is that you will, in fact, take on, what it is that you won't. You'll be able to draw your lines of demarcation to what is important to your purpose and what isn't. So that is what mentorship has meant to me, that I've tried to carry on throughout my career.
Thank you. Thank you all for sharing. These are really great tips. I know people are scribbling, writing down their notes because these are really great gems. And one of the things I kind of heard, Myra, you talked a little bit about is you got the job description, you didn't read it, but you were like, I don't know if I could do this work. But sometimes it's something that we need to do to kind of step outside of our comfort zone. Like I've heard that if you read a job description and you can do everything, you shouldn't apply to that job because you're already overqualified. You should go for the next level up. Now, again, I've heard that. I haven't personally done that myself, but I know that that's something that, people talk about doing. So I think it's really admirable that, you were able to kind of step outside your comfort zone and take a risk. And the other thing I've heard is, how they say it's not just what you know, it's who you know, but who you know needs to know what you can do. So that again, if you had an interaction with, Myra Henry and she said, oh, so and so, I met her at this event and she's really good at X, Y, and Z, that might, help you along in your career. So I think very, very good advice. Thank you. So we're about halfway through the panel. I wanted just to remind people, if you have questions for our panelists, please put something in the chat and we'll make sure that we read them as we're going through questions. So I have another one for you. This one might get a little deep. So we've all heard it. Black women are now the most educated group in the United States. We've done the work, we've earned the degrees, we've checked every box that they told us that we need to check. So clearly we are more than capable of, doing the work, leading teams. But even with all this education, it doesn't always translate into leadership roles or even promotions. And now with DEI under attack, like I've never seen it before, we're often met with misconceptions and harmful narratives that we are only in the room because we're Black or because we're women, not because we're qualified. So how do you handle being both highly qualified and still underestimated? And then what do you do to remind yourself and others that you belong in the room? It's a loaded question, but again, you're qualified, you're capable, but you may have, again, like Essie Calhoun said, she had a boss that was not really on her side, right? So what do you do to kind of tell people that you are in the room and you belong there and you know your stuff and you're handling business? And that's this one I want everybody to definitely answer.
I think it's really important that we recognize who we are and the gifts that God has put inside of us. And that when we walk into spaces, we walk as his representative. And if we're walking as his representative, that means that we are enough and we don't have to force anybody to believe that. We just have to be who we are. And I think that means that, there's a level of confidence that we need to exude, even in situations where we might be uncomfortable and we might be afraid. We can't let them see that.
Mm-hmm.
We have to stand in the giftings that we have been given. And there are times that we have to assert ourselves and let our voices be heard, and that we have to represent when others aren't in the room to represent us. There have been times that I have had superiors who were likely intimidated by my presence. And I could not allow that to stop me from doing what I knew I was supposed to be able to do, And so I pray for them. And then I also pray for wisdom and discernment as I, walk and navigate those spaces, because those are spaces that may not always be friendly spaces and may not always be affirming spaces. But that's not who I get my affirmation from. And so that's how I have to, walk into spaces and into rooms that may not always be welcoming.
And I'd like to just add and pull on what Dr. Tanya has said. We have to remind ourselves that those who are called have also been qualified. So it's not by mistake that we show up in the spaces that we are. And again, it doesn't, from whatever seat you sit in within an organization, you are a leader of that space. I was telling a colleague today, I remember being a receptionist, and my job was to make the coffee, and I was the leader of the coffee. Don't show up at 8:02 and tell me how to make the coffee. That was my job. And I took my job, I owned it. I took my job seriously. So from the seat that you're currently occupy, take ownership and lead from that space. And additionally, right? So how do you do that? What does that mean? What books do you read? That's another common question we get. One of my favorite leadership books, and it's old now. Sylvia Hewitt is the author, and it's called Executive Presence. And she's written a 2.0 edition about it. But my favorite line in that book is when you show up to work, whether it's a presentation, whether it's just your daily tasks and responsibilities on your job, know your stuff 6 questions deep.
Mhm.
Anticipate what people are going to ask you or what folks may need to know, so that who you are and what you do on your job can't be questioned. Can't be questioned. So know who you are and know who you are, what your responsibilities are, and what you do to add value to your organization.
So real quick, so does that go back to the old adage where you have to be twice as good?
I don't think so. I
Okay.
think to a certain degree, I think we're born with that, right? That is instilled in us that we have to work twice as hard to get half as far. But I think
Mm-hmm.
knowing your stuff six question deep gives you the courage to lean into some of those uncomfortable spaces and stand in truth when we know we're going to be questioned. So
Okay.
being able to lean into who we are and what we know because we're prepared.
And I
Thank you.
also think, Myra, that just sometimes to build confidence, I find in mentoring others is that oftentimes when you're doing those presentations, for example, you have to understand more than likely you're the only one in the room that's the expert at what you're talking about. So it's no need to be shaken at the knees. Be prepared. Yes, please do that. We always must be prepared. But know that you walk into that presentation or that room as a subject matter expert. Be confident in that. And the questions that they ask sometimes maybe just to trip you up. They think they're tripping you up, but you're the expert. You know more than your audience. And so embrace that.
And I'll add to that, Charlene, you are so right. I have recently, I think, Madam Facilitator, you're going to get to a question about fun and unwinding in a moment. However, I'll just add, I like trashy TV when I want to turn my brain off, and Housewives is part of that. And to your point, Charlene, my favorite housewife said, "Who gonna check me, boo? It's my story. I'm the subject matter expert. Who gonna check me?"
That's one of my favorite quotes. So uh Essie Calhoun McDavid, I know that you lived, breathed, slept, ate, did all the things to this DEI work for a very long time. So like to get some of your thoughts on again the attack on DEI right now, and then again women, Black women especially. Again, we're educated, we're qualified. Sometimes we're passed over. Sometimes we're put in positions where we don't get support. So, what are some of your thoughts about how to navigate that?
Well, first off, let me just say, um, I am very disappointed. It's probably not a good word. When I hear and I listen to what you guys are experiencing, and when I think about what was going on in the workplace 20 years ago or more, it is very heartbreaking that some of the very same things are still happening and that we're still having some of the same experiences. It's also, I worked in a company that really where we were really making strides towards setting goals and having metrics. And one of the more difficult things about my role was that often there were people who actually had a higher rank in the company than me. But when I walked in the room with my message for what their division needed to do, or what their department needed to do, or what the expectations were, or when I scheduled a training session or something that they were to participate in, there was no questioning that, because that's the path we were on, and that's the power that came with my position. And I remember how difficult it was to get the culture change, to get the metrics in place, to set the expectations, to set the goals, and to have people start to try to march in the right direction. And to now hear that these positions are being eliminated, that whole departments are being eliminated, that companies and universities and everybody are being punished because of that. I mean, it's setting the clock back at least 50 years. And so in my lifetime, I've lived from where we were 50 years ago to where we are now. And so this is very distressing. It is really important for people to stand up and to say, we must continue this work. We must do this work. And to hear, as I hear you guys talk about some of the things that you're experiencing, you should not be experiencing that now. That should not be happening. And one of the things we say is, you know, we don't say as much. I used to hear you have to work twice as hard and all, but you really do have to be prepared. You have to be prepared. I did have a mentor who said to me, Calhoun, you don't have to be perfect. You just have to be excellent. And so we do still have to be excellent. We cannot go, and I think because of the progress that we were making, younger women don't really understand, or may not understand, that they do still have this burden on their shoulders. They because of affirmative action, because of DEI, and doors have opened, even though they haven't opened anywhere near to the extent that they should have opened. But the road has been a little bit different, because people have been saying, oh, I have to have more diversity. I have to have greater representation. And those doors are just going to close. That's what just, really breaks my heart, because we had not done in this country or in corporations the work that needed to be done to really change hearts. And so this is deep embedded in people, that now they have permission. They have permission to not have to do these things. And so it is going to be tougher. But clearly, as we think about what our ancestors have gone through, and to get us to where we are, to get me to where I am, to get you guys to where you are, they didn't get there by lying down. They went through greater struggles than this. And so I hear people say, we're prepared for this. We may not be prepared, but we have it somewhere in our genes, somewhere in us, to be prepared to survive and to thrive. And so we have to be determined. We can't think that in 4 years this will be over and we will go back to where we were. We will never go back to where we were. And even if in 4 years we have a change in administration, so many things will have shifted and changed that it's going to take years to get ourselves back to a different point. So the struggle, we used to say the struggle still continues. And that was one of my themes for a while, and one of my, in the materials that we produce, but it still continues. And you and the women coming behind you, and the women that we mentor, and the women that we sponsor, and the women that we encourage, have a battle ahead of them. But I feel confident that they're up to the task. I hope I answered you.
You did. That was great. If it's one thing that Black women tend to be, is resilient, right?
Yes.
And we don't tend to back down on a fight. So I hope that you are right, that we're gonna get past it. It might take a while, but we're in it, right? And so
And so mentoring and sponsoring and really thinking beyond ourselves. We're all focused, or you're all focused, I'm done, on your career and what you need to do and where you're going. But certainly we have to put even more energy into bringing along this next generation of Black women.
Awesome. Thank you.
I,
Okay,
I
so
just,
we have go ahead. Go ahead.
I wanted to comment a little bit on what Essie said, because I think it's very important when you consider women who want to go into C-suite roles or who are currently in it. The politics in the C-suite is great. It's enormous. And I think that as we continue to journey this administration's new executive orders, those politics are going to even be deeper. And so
Yes.
I think it's important to recognize that and to realize you're going to have courage to be able to put your stake in the ground as to what you will and will not do. So for me, for example, I make it very clear, I'm not a politician. If I wanted to be a politician, I would have went into politics. But I am a lover of people. I'm a human resources professional. I know it through and through. So I'm not going to play politics with that. I'm going to be here and do what is right for the people. So that's my stake in the ground. So all that politics that's going on around me and the ability to try to make an inroad here or make an inroad there isn't for me. What my focus continues to be are the people, the people, the people. And so I just wanted to remind us that politics is real. You have to be able to deal with it, and you have to be able to put a stake in the ground as to what is your principles, to understand your identity, where you are and where you sit.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
I wanted to chime in a couple of
Sure.
things that Essie said. One was related to the heart work. Um, and that is some of the hardest work, heart work. Because if you're looking to change people's minds and change their hearts about how they see us and how they see others who are not like them, or how they have othered people, um, that is some of the hardest work out there, quite honestly.
Mm-hmm.
You really have to not necessarily meet people where they are, but you have to disarm them first of all, and get them to see things from another lens and from another perspective. And to get them to see things from another lens and perspective, you have to almost talk about the things that matter to them.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes the relationships that we develop can help people to see us differently, but relationships aren't always, people aren't always open to relationships. And so, like, because I've done a lot of that DEI work and that DEI training, and a lot of times using, scenarios and case studies to get them to see it from another perspective helps to kind of, you know, disarm folks and create dialogue around the discrimination and the racism or the sexism that exists in different places. And it sometimes is what can open people's hearts up to say, well, maybe there is another way to look at this, and to look at people and look at how I've handled and how I've discriminated against others. And I think that's something that when we have the opportunity to use our voice, we've got to use our voice. So I told you I worked in at the state level in education, and the language at risk is language that's used federally across the whole country. But what people can't see is how much of a deficit lens that at-risk language fits under. It's very much comes from a deficit perspective. I don't know any person that wants to be seen or viewed as an at-risk person.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so, in the position that I was, I proposed, at the state level, that we get rid of that language. And the response was, there's not an appetite for that, at the highest levels. And this is what people are used to. And so that language didn't get changed. but my voice was heard. And I think that's the thing that's most important. And sometimes we have to get active outside of the workplace. I lead a local chapter of the National Coalition of 100 Black Women, and we advocate for Black women and girls. And we advocate in the areas of education and economic empowerment, where pay equity may come into that conversation, and health and public policy. And so while we may not enjoy playing politics, it's sometimes important that we're advocating for change in legislation and change in regulations that govern the workplace, so that we have access and opportunities, especially when that hard work isn't being done. Sometimes it takes a law change or a regulation change to make people do the right thing.
Mhm.
And I remember the late Dr. Miles Monroe used to say, you change the law, you change the culture.
All right. Okay. Well, thank you all. That was, I know it's a heavy topic, but it's on everyone's mind because it's in the news and we're all living it right now. So thank you all for your perspectives. We do have a question from the chat. This question says, often women of color bring so much to the table and tend to carry large workloads and are asked to do more or give more. How do we ensure our compensation matches our effort and value/worth? So it sounds like, hey, here's your
Well,
job, but then can
I'm
you do
sorry,
this
I
little
shudder
extra?
at that one, and I just say you clearly have to advocate for yourself. I also would advise women who are in corporate settings that you understand the pay structure and the different levels. I will admit that I didn't. I came from I was excited to be able to get into corporate America. Then I was excited that within 2 years I was being promoted. And 2 years later, I was a sales manager. And 2 years later, I'm back at corporate doing this great work for them. And so I was excited about moving, what I thought was moving. I didn't pay attention to the grade levels and whether or not I was being properly compensated. To be really honest, I was finally getting to a point where I made 6 figures and I was so excited. And then I was asked to take on the role of the chief diversity officer. And finally, I was getting a little wiser. And I was on vacation when they called me and said the person had given them 2 weeks notice and would I take this on with the other jobs I already had, by the way. I didn't get to, I was just going to be chief diversity officer and VP of community, which I did. But I did have the good sense to call up one of my, when I think about it now, must mentors who was in HR and senior enough, who advised me on what to take from their offer and what not to worry about. And what I learned later is had I not talked to him, I would have taken what they offered me first. And it would not have put me at the senior level that I should have been at. It would not have given me the bonus structure that I needed. It would not, so I would have had a title. So often they will give us a title, but not pay. And so and that was the learning for me. And I look back and realize that all along, I probably have been making that mistake. And so don't be afraid. All they can do is say no. And then you can decide, do I still want to do this work? Or do I not want to do it? Or do I want to go someplace else? But do not be afraid to advocate for yourself and to understand and to have an ally somewhere. Because I don't know how it is now in corporate America, but a lot of that stuff was very cloaked, especially when you reached a certain level. You didn't know, and so it impacts the kind of bonus you will get. And I remember that there would be big headlines in the newspaper in March that the senior management were not taking pay raises. Well, I found out why. A 5% pay raise might have given me, I don't know, $10,000 or something. Heck, but who cares about a 5% pay raise when I was going to get this big, huge bonus as a result of the company's performance? So do understand, if you're in the corporation, read the, I forgot the name of the thing you can read that tells you all of that information, because they have to file it with the federal government.
1090.
Thank you. Do understand all of that, and so that you know where you stand and where you are and where you fit in the organization. And so don't get carried away by the fact that you have this new title and this big title. Make sure you have some money that matches the title.
That's really good advice. And I know that sometimes negotiations are they make everybody nervous.
Yes.
But that is really good advice. And I think Dr. Wilson was talking about being humble, but also knowing what you can do. And so if they see that you can do this work, they should be paying you for your value and your experience along with the title. So
yes,
good advice. Good advice. And a couple more people want to comment on that one.
And know that, just to piggyback a little bit on Essie, and know that women or men who don't look like us, they don't have any issues in coming in to demand more money or a higher bonus. They have no problems with that at all. They have no problems in describing what they believe has been an injustice to them in terms of pay or lack of promotion. But there's something about, and I haven't quite figured it out. I think it may stem just from our journey through slavery, but there's something in my career. There's something about, I notice African Americans, particularly women, who tend to be very kind of passive about it. Like, we know intuitively that we're not being paid correctly, or there's some injustices and workloads, etc. But we won't be as bold as our cousins in making those declarations that, hey, wait a minute, somebody needs to look at this. And that's a reality. And so for the younger people that are coming up, I try to encourage them to ask the questions. In my position, I can't come out and say, well, yes, indeed, this is wrong, depending on the situation. But, try to encourage them to take action on how you go about looking up the information to determine whether or not you're being paid fairly. That whole pay equity, I guess it goes from industry to industry. I don't know anything but healthcare, and it's real. I mean, it still exists. And we still have to reckon with the fact that as women, particularly women of color, by and large, we are paid less.
I'll leave it to the HR professionals to say what you should do, but I'm going to just share a very quick reflection on what you should not do. I remember going from a job, being promoted, and happy to have the title, as Essie said, scared to advocate for myself, as Charlene just said, and it worked for a boss who kept moving the bar, which was good. Because she told me, she says, you know what? You haven't begun to lean into your stretch. So she challenged me because I would get complacent very, very quickly. But the thing that angered me is I'd been working in this particular department for a couple of years, and we were having a conversation about pay or whatever. She says, you realize when you took this job, you accepted way less than what I was willing to pay you. And I'll never forget, I negotiated my vacation, because I had already had a vacation to Disney World on the books, and I didn't want to lose my vacation. But so whatever number she threw out, I said, okay, I have never done, I don't care if it's 15 cents. We're going to talk about that 15 cents, and it's going to come out in my favor. I'll never, it was almost like she punched me in my gut when she said that. That hurt. So always negotiate.
That's a good point, Myra.
And New York State, just real quick, if those of you are in New York State is now a salary transparency state. So the companies are supposed to be putting their salary range on their job description. Now, sometimes it'll say between 55 and 155, which doesn't really help at all, but it gives you a little bit of a guide as to what you should be making and what you could ask for. So, sorry,
No,
Dr.
that's
Breland,
okay.
go ahead.
I was just going to say, similar to Myra, I had it was a little bit different though. I had a situation where I was asked what salary I wanted, and I wasn't expecting that question. I should have, but I didn't expect it, and I lowballed. But I felt so uncomfortable when I left that by the time I got home, I called the HR director and I said, I spoke too soon. You asked me that question. This is how I responded. And I really don't think that that's fair. And I raised my number like 20,000 more. And they said, okay, thank you. And then when the job was offered, the pay was even higher than that. And so it was a blessing. I was nervous about asserting myself in that way because I thought, well, maybe they may not, hire me. But when I did it, it was number one, I felt better about myself. I didn't know I could have gone even higher, but I was thankful that they did come in higher than what I had come back with. But the idea is, sometimes we have to do the uncomfortable thing to put ourselves in a better position because believe me, um, men are not afraid, as Charlene was saying, they are not afraid to ask for, and they don't just negotiate for the salary. They also negotiate for the various perks as well that come along with the position. And so we have to be more confident in that, in asking for what we want, because we bring value to the table and we need to know our worth and we need to know our value.
I just want to make another point around this whole issue. Now, what I'm beginning to see is a change. It's not just the negotiation of the salary anymore, but it's also the negotiation of what is my career path. So I'm starting out at this position, but really I aspire to do this, to be here. So what can your organization offer me to make sure that I am achieving what I need to achieve, what I think that I am worth, which is a total change from how I was raised in my career. But the younger generation that is coming up, they've been smart. They understand the importance of progression, and so they begin to negotiate that in the very beginning, opposed to mid in their career or close to the end of their career. They do it in the beginning. And so I'm beginning to see a shift, a large shift in the negotiations. And I just wanted to remind those that are online who are younger in their career, don't forget about the negotiation of the career path, and it's important.
Thank you. So we got a couple more questions in the chat. We're going to try to get through at least one more. How do you anticipate leading in the wake of the new executive order that segregation can be ignored? It's no longer necessary to desegregate. I'm going to read that again. How do you anticipate leading in the wake of the new executive order that segregation can be ignored and it's no longer necessary to desegregate?
Well, I'll take a stab at that. I want to begin by saying, let us not forget that the executive orders are the executive orders as it relates to DI and J, but Title VII or Title IX, depending on if you're in education, under 1964 Civil Rights Act has not gone away. So if there is issues of discrimination based on protected classes, there's still remedies for that for now. So I just don't want us to get that confused. While D, E, I, and J, or D, E, and I, wherever you may be, has to be thought about in a different manner, please know that Title VII and Title IX has not gone away. And so the EEOC is still in place. And if there's issues that you are confronting based on your race or your gender, protected class, your age, etc., you still have remedies for that.
Okay, well said. So since it's an executive order, it's not, but it's not a law, has not been
That's
changed
correct.
because we have, okay.
That's correct.
Okay, so we're good with that. Okay, so then one final question. Um, once you are in a leadership role, how do you stay there or continue to climb the ladder, especially in this, again, political climate nationally and in your organization? So once you make it to the top, how do you stay there or how do you get higher?
Yeah, I think it kind of goes back to where this conversation started in knowing your value, being clear on what your aspirations are, surrounding yourself with an executive team. And I mean your personal executive team, your mentors, your sponsors, your homegirl that's going to pull your coattail and make sure your Afro puff is straight. All of those important people that are around our executive tables and that are in our inner circle that keep us moving forward. Yes, and we established we as Black women are going to do this. We're going to make sure we know our job responsibilities. We're going to show up prepared. We're going to know our work and probably our co-workers' work as well. We're going to do that. But in doing so, we always must make sure that we capture our voice in this, that we don't lose sight of who we are, what our leadership philosophies are, what we're walking towards, and making sure we're standing firm in our purpose.
Okay, all right. So oh wait, as Helm McDavid, you're on mute if you want to say one more thing.
I'm sorry, there was background noise here, so I muted myself. But,
Okay.
I think all of these things are really important and we really have, but I just want young women to be prepared for the fact that it's going to be tougher. It is going to be tougher despite all those things. And I guess I say that because I come from a time when it was tougher and we're going to go back to that time. And so all of what Dr. Myra just said is really important in terms of how you keep yourself together, but the people around you will take advantage of the fact that they've been given license to trip you up. So it will be tougher. I just be prepared for that.
Well, I'd like to bring back on President of Rochester Alumni Chapter, Dr. Shirley Green, and then the second Vice President, Monet Barkley. And while they're coming back on camera, I want to thank you all for sharing your stories today, answering the questions, saying things that needed to be said. Some we didn't want to hear, but we had to hear. Thanks for providing songs for our playlist and some books that we need to read. And we appreciate you all paving the way for the rest of us. And we're not going to give up. We're going to keep fighting, and we're going to remember to lift as we climb and bring the next generation forward. So thank you all. I appreciate it. It was nice meeting everyone. And then I'll turn it over to Dr. Green and Sora Barkley.
So I want to first thank you, Sora Livingston, for an excellent job in facilitating this conversation. So kudos to you in your facilitation.
Thank you.
And I also want to thank our panelists, Dr. Myra Henry, Dr. Tanya Breland, S.C. Calhoun, and Dr. Charlene Wilson. You have provided many nuggets, many tips. The comments have been overwhelming, and we just cannot thank you enough. I just want to end with two things. I always have to put a plug into the work that Delta Sigma Theta Sorority is doing. This week, as I started, I talked about our May week. We have two more events this week. On Thursday, our financial literacy, which will be held at the RIT Center for Urban Entrepreneurship. And on Saturday, Savor Our Stories and Saving Ourselves at East High. So I invite everyone listening to join us for those conversations. And you all said so many things, and I tried to sum it up in a few words. So I'm going to end with Black women, when you're in the room, walk in the room knowing who you are. Stand in confidence, stand bold, and always remember, pay it forward. And I'll turn it over to Soar Barkley.
I don't, in the interest of time, I don't have much to say except for this was beyond my wildest dreams. This is what was necessary and needed as in a time such as this. And I'm so grateful to each and every one of you that is on the screen, each of you listening, each of you that can go and pay this information and inspirational stories forward. I'm just very, very grateful, and I'm so appreciative and so blessed to have met you all, and I thank you all from the bottom of my heart. Everyone have a wonderful night. Good evening. God bless.
Thank
Night,
you.
everyone.